Hi, hello, and welcome. When Ocarina of Time released back in 1998, well, I was too busy sneaking around in my sneaking suit as the legendary Solid Snake. I'm a snake. I didn't own a Nintendo 64, which is a bit of a sad tale. We aren't here to talk about that. Because I didn't own a Nintendo 64, I couldn't play the craziest new Zelda to date, but that didn't stop me. No, wait. I had a friend who owned a console and the game, so I made sure to attach myself to him like a growth and hang out with him every day. I ended up playing through the entire game while at my friend's house, and I gotta say, I thought the game was fine. I had a good time, sure, but I just wanted to get back to finding the quickest routes in Metal Gear Solid in what I later realized was my first and only attempts at speedrunning. Fast forward years later to the Wii U. Yes, much darker time that era, but it toughened us and it taught us how to do things other than play games. I replayed Ocarina of Time because everyone constantly yelled at me that it was the best Zelda game ever and there was no debating it, and if you like any other Zelda, then you were absolutely wrong, and how dare I think that Wind Waker was a better Zelda game to date. Sorry, lost myself there a little bit. Anyway, I replayed it on the Wii U and thought, yeah, this is still fine. The difference, though, was that I now started to think it was overrated. What? Fast forward again to the year of our Lord 2024, and I decided to try it thrice. They say that the 20th time is the charm, but in this case, it was different. It was definitely the third time was the charm. I loved it this time around. I began to wonder why my perspective changed, since there are still things that have not aged well with it. Why do I always Z-target just to move the camera, damn it? I sat down, well, I was already sitting while playing, so I sat in a very sophisticated way. You totally should have seen it. I sophisticatedly sat upon my throne and pondered the mysteries that were my perspective change. And here they are! Ocarina of Time is a masterpiece. No, not in the sense of the actual game itself per se, but more akin to how you value a piece of art well after it was originally created. You appreciate the impact that art had on the community and for all the other artwork around it. For example, during its initial release, 3D gaming, especially platforming and action-adventure games, were very new, and both developers and players had to learn to navigate this new polygonal world. How to view this new world was kind of a big deal, so the in-game camera was incredibly important. Many games tried, and well, they failed at camera work in these new 3D games. Now you listen here, I still enjoyed Croc even through its flaws. The camera was not ideal in Ocarina of Time simply due to the time period it released in, but it introduced a new thing that would permanently impact games moving forward, a targeting system that worked well. In the game, to move the camera, you don't use a second stick to look around like any modern games you play today. No, these were the times of Neanderthals, where there wasn't even a second joystick to use. We just had a weird cramp-inducing controller that forced you to hold it weird and use this newfangled stick-a-majig. So the implementation of Z-targeting was impressive in ways I didn't realize at the time. Moving the camera was made much easier than other games thanks to the Z-targeting, and it further pushed this idea of implementing some type of targeting system in future games. The player would use the Z button, which was located on the trigger finger of the player while holding the N64 controller. Once pressed, the game would lock on to the nearest enemy or ally for the player and focus on them. It was brilliantly used, and it helped to get used to this new 3D gaming landscape. This game also really pushed the idea of taking a past idea and building upon it. Sure, other games had done something similar before, but not to the same level that Ocarina of Time did it. Okay, there are some spoilers here for A Link to the Past if you want to skip ahead to this time here. So, in A Link to the Past, the player is introduced to traveling between the light and dark world. It was a really cool concept that was a neat story element and added new depths of difficulty. Ocarina of Time took that concept of two worlds overlapping each other and gave it a new code of time travel, thus making it its own. In case you haven't played Ocarina of Time, please go play Ocarina of Time. You get to a point in the game where Link ends up time traveling to the future. He's no longer a child, and the land of Hyrule is no longer flourishing. Ganon has almost won and rules over Hyrule with all of his evilness. This not only opened up incredibly interesting puzzles and ways for these two eras to interact with each other, but it added a super cool story element that was mind-blowing for a game at its time. This time-traveling mechanic and storytelling tool helped to change the landscape of storytelling. Now, I mentioned Metal Gear Solid all those long minutes ago, so you may be asking, Bauer, that game has a real story, so why give all the credit to Ocarina of Time? Let me explain. Sure, the main storyline doesn't hold a candle to a game like Metal Gear Solid with its soap opera levels of betrayal and backstabbing. It's not that Ocarina of Time has a bad story, it just isn't as in-depth as others that may have come right before it or after it. The difference, though, is that there are so many stories told around the main story that give life to this world. For example, the Spirit Temple. Much later in the game, the player has to navigate and conquer the Spirit Temple. In this dungeon, there are scary creatures throughout, like Gibdos, zombie creatures who will scream at you and latch onto you if you get too close. But what's so interesting is the story of the dungeon itself. In the past, as young Link, you do enter this dungeon, but you only make it so far. Then you have to switch to adult Link. This dungeon is filled with what appears to be a very dark story of people being tortured and treated awful as they were captives. I don't know any official story behind this temple, if it exists, but as I played, I was captivated by what had happened in this dungeon. The dungeon as a whole just has a really nasty and gross feel to it, from the color usage to the cells everywhere to different levels underground where worse creatures hide. There are some obstacles throughout the dungeon that are, well, they seem odd there unless they were used to cause people pain before you arrived. It's the little details like this that really captivated me in my third playthrough of Ocarina of Time. I just somehow missed all these cool things. Look, I know I'm not the brightest light bulb in the thing. There are so many other examples of this dark storytelling throughout the game. Hell, look at the Skulltula side quest. Speaking of dungeons, this game is probably the best overall quality of dungeons. Except the Water Temple. The Water Temple can suck it. Anyway, what makes each of these dungeons even better too are their bosses. The bosses in Ocarina of Time are second to none. They are diverse, they require some thought to find their weaknesses, but they're never too difficult. Looking back on it now, this would have been such a mind-blowing experience for the newbies to 3D gaming. As I went through every boss in the game, I don't think I disliked any of them. Sure, some are way better than others, but that's more that the really good bosses in this game are they're just that good. They make sure to utilize any new gadget or weapon you've acquired. They coax the player to be cunning, and they're a spectacle almost every single time. The weapons and gadgets in this game were incredibly cool. Aiming the bow in first-person view was crazy at the time. The shield plays more of a role in combat, thanks again to Z targeting. The normal Zelda editions like bombs with added variants like bomb chews. But there's one addition to this game that made it just so damn good. If you've played the game, you know what it is, so say it with me. Hookshot is the GOAT. The actual usage of the hookshot is incredibly useful in various situations. It can get you to different areas that you couldn't normally reach, and it can stun some enemies and bring them towards you so you can whomp on them. The look of the hookshot and how the chain wraps around inside of the casing, and even just the sounds it makes as it flies out and retracts, is so good. The hookshot is one of my top 3 Zelda gadgets, weapons, tools of all Zelda games ever. But we can't be riding this praise train without mentioning the music. Even back in my admittedly stupid days of not really caring about Ocarina of Time, I absolutely love the soundtrack. On top of excellent audio cues throughout the game itself, the music is the perfect blend of simplistic, memorable, and legitimately great compositions. After replaying, I constantly caught myself humming different songs, ranging from the melodies played on the ocarina, Looking at You, Epona's song, nay, to overworld and dungeon music. The soundtrack in Ocarina of Time is iconic in the gaming world. I'm willing to bet that even if you aren't a Zelda fan, you'll recognize the music from Ocarina of Time, as well as the impact it had on future games in the series. Come on, listen to Saria's song and tell me you don't want to start dancing like good old Darunia. Ocarina of Time truly paved the way for not only future Zelda titles, but the action-adventure game landscape as a whole. Does Ocarina do anything particularly better than anything that came after it? No, not at all. But without this pivotal game in the Zelda series, a lot of mechanics may not have come until way later, if they showed up at all. Z targeting, the nicely done 3D puzzles, the jump in visual quality, let alone the jump into a 3D world, the grandiose feeling injected into the story setup and music. It all comes together into a product that was able to join art and interactive entertainment that is a memorable and iconic experience. I wasn't always an Ocarina of Time fan, but I have to say, I am one now. Better late than never, right?